when the American came, 90% of the families, in the rural families, had maybe one pair of shoes in the whole family. The average farm worker owned one pair of shirts, one singlet, and that was his wardrobe. He might have a change for baptisms or holidays. The country is still underfed. It's still underdeveloped, but compared with what I've seen, you can't begin to believe what the American contribution has been in this country. The opening up of industries, the opening up of opportunities, the opening up of education, the development to where there are brains to drain instead of no brains except in a very small elite, no trained brains, is the offspring of this American period. The Filipino male average weight when the American first came here was something like 110 pounds. 90% of the women were under 5 feet tall. A typical Filipino woman weighed 90 pounds. Each generation of Filipinos since then has put on 10 pounds. All right, that's in spite of hell, high water, typhoons, wars. But when the Americans came, the life expectancy of a Filipino at birth was less than 30 years. Half of the population died before age 30. The death rate of newborn babies was 300 per thousand in the first year. Now, you don't have to have a theory to say that when you have these situations, you don't theorize. You come in with a hospital, you drain the swamps, you kill the mosquitoes, you set up your leper colonies, you set up your schools, and you can't have business until you have stenographers, so you start courses in stenography. You can't have doctors till you have nurses, so you start nurse training. You can't kill the mosquitoes until you have people that know how to run a flit gun, so you have schools in killing mosquitoes. Your cattle are dying of anthrax and tuberculosis, so you have to bring in people to kill the diseased cattle and to raise the caliber of the cattle that you raise. You introduce new breeds of chickens. You introduce carrots and string beans, things that had never been grown here before. You introduce strawberries in the mountains, celery, which you couldn't eat because it was decorative, because there was such a high rate of intestinal disease that you couldn't eat. You used it as garnish, not to eat. So that you're into a situation that you can't begin to understand today unless you go back among the very farthest back parts of the country and see what it's like to live where there are no roads, no steamships, no trains, no buses, and a letter, a special delivery letter could take a month to get to you from Manila. Although the distance was just a few hundred miles, it was just the luck of the draw. When we first came, the friar, the padre of the town, was the lawmaker. What he said went. It didn't matter who was mayor, it didn't matter who was governor. When an issue came up, you'd run over and ask the priest what you should do, and then you did it. There was a very easy situation, no brains required. You have to remember that it was a period when hotels were very rare, and anybody who came through was automatically a guest of somebody, and hospitality was very prodigal and open. And it was an area that was very subject to typhoons, so the town was blown over periodically, and people just took it for granted that they'd be taken into whatever houses were left standing, and they'd feed one another, they'd doctor one another. It was a capitalist form of socialism. Everybody was socially responsible for everybody else. The old-time family lived in an old-time house with the high ceilings and the ventilator fans because it was a lot more comfortable. We lived in a thatched house. Why did we have the thatch? It cost more to keep than a other kind of a roof because it was a lot cooler. You had the rustle of the nipa and the breezes coming through the house all the time. If you were a newcomer of the late generation, you lived in a poured concrete bungalow. And you had, at the late 30s, you had air conditioning, and you always had colds because the air conditioning didn't work that well, and people were always sick. Americans, Spaniards, Filipinos, French, Germans, Italian, everybody wandered through. There was the period, you have to remember, where people were still hunting for gold. There were people hoping to start pearl fisheries. Their coconut industry was building up. The plantations were starting. The abaca expanded tremendously. It was a period of very, very great expectations until the collapse after World War I. Everything was in boom.